My granddaughter, Lily, who had just turned 8 years old, tugged on my sleeve in the middle of her own birthday party, pulled me down so she could reach my ear, and whispered, "Grandpa, don't eat the cake Mommy gives you. The other one. Eat the other one." And I laughed, because she was 8 and it was a birthday party and children say things. I laughed and I patted her head and I told her, "Okay, sweetheart, whatever you say." And she looked up at me with the most serious face I have ever seen on a child, a face far too worried for a birthday, and she didn't laugh back. And then she darted off to play, and I straightened up, still smiling, and I looked across that crowded living room toward the kitchen. And there, framed in the kitchen doorway, holding a plate with a single slice of cake on it, was my daughter-in-law, Brooke. And she was watching me and Lily with an expression I'd never seen on her face before, an expression that made the smile die on my lips because it was the look of someone who has just realized that a secret might be getting out. And in that instant, a cold understanding started to move through me, the first clear thought I'd had in weeks. So when Brooke brought me that plate a few minutes later, that special slice she'd cut just for me, and set it down in front of me with a warm smile and said, "Here you go, Roy, I saved you the corner piece," I waited. And when she went back to the kitchen and no one was looking, I switched the plates. I took the slice she'd given me and I quietly swapped it for a plain piece off the tray that everyone else was eating from. And what happened in the next hour changed my life, and very nearly ended someone else's freedom, and made me pick up my phone and dial a number I had not dialed in 30 years. I need to stop right here, 10 seconds in, because I have to tell you something about myself so that you understand what that little girl's whisper actually meant to me, and why I froze when I saw that look on my daughter-in-law's face. For about 2 months before that birthday party, I had been slowly, terrifyingly, losing my mind. Or so I believed. I'd been having spells. Confusion, fog, forgetting things, losing whole afternoons feeling drugged and stupid and old. I'd become convinced that I was in the early stages of dementia, that my brain was failing, that I was becoming a burden and a ghost of myself. It was the most frightened I have ever been in my life, more frightened than of dying, because losing your mind means you disappear while your body stays behind. And my whole family had been watching it happen and talking, in low voices, about what to do with me. And then an 8-year-old whispered in my ear that I shouldn't eat the special cake. And a door opened in my mind that I hadn't known was there. So if you've ever doubted your own mind, or been made to doubt it, if you've ever had someone convince you that you couldn't trust yourself, then stay with me and go ahead and subscribe, because this is a story about the most frightening thing one person can do to another, and about how the clear eyes of a child who loved me saw the truth that all the adults had missed. Okay, let me back up, because you can't understand that plate of cake without understanding how a healthy 70-year-old man came to believe he was losing his mind. My name is Roy Maddox. I'm 70 years old, and until about 2 years ago I had a full and happy life with my wife, Helen. We were married 44 years, and then Helen died, her heart, quickly, in her sleep, and my whole world went dark, the way it does when you lose the person you built everything with and around. After Helen passed, I was a mess for a while, the way you are. And I had a small health scare a few months later, nothing serious, a dizzy spell that turned out to be a minor thing with my blood pressure, but it frightened my son, Eric, and his wife, Brooke, or at least it gave them a reason. And so they suggested, kindly, warmly, that they and my granddaughter should move into my house, the big house Helen and I had raised Eric in, which I still owned, free and clear, so that they could take care of me. Help me out. Make sure I wasn't alone. And I was grieving and lonely, and I loved having my granddaughter around, so I said yes. And Eric and Brooke and little Lily moved into my house. Let me be clear about my son. Eric is a good man, and he loves me, and he had no idea what was happening under his own roof. I need you to hold on to that, because it matters to the end of this story. Eric traveled a lot for his work. He was gone half of every month, and when he was home he was tired and busy, and he trusted his wife completely to run the household and to look after his old father. He was not a part of what happened. He was, in his own way, a victim of it too, deceived as thoroughly as I was, and it nearly destroyed him when he found out. Brooke is a different matter. And I'll tell you the truth about Brooke and about what she wanted, because it's the engine of this whole terrible thing. Brooke wanted my house and my savings and everything Helen and I had spent 44 years building. I didn't understand that at first. For a long time I thought she was just a devoted daughter-in-law taking care of a grieving old man. But looking back now, I can see it clearly. From the moment they moved in, Brooke began, slowly and carefully, to take control of my life. She took over the cooking, all of it, insisting I let her handle my meals. She took over my medications, said it was safer if she managed my pills so I wouldn't get confused and double up. She started handling my mail, my appointments, my bills, to take things off my plate. One piece at a time, she gathered the strings of my life into her hands, and she did it all with such warmth, such helpfulness, that I thanked her for it. And then, about 2 months before Lily's birthday, I started to lose my mind. That's what it felt like. It came on gradually. I'd feel foggy in the afternoons, heavy and slow, like my head was full of wet sand. I'd forget conversations we'd just had. I'd fall asleep in my chair at odd hours and wake up groggy and disoriented, not sure what day it was. I'd go to say a word, and it wouldn't be there. I started having trouble following the television, following a simple recipe, following my own thoughts. Some days were better, some were much worse, but the trend was clear, and it was terrifying, and it was getting worse fast. And here is the part that I've had to make peace with, because it's the cruelest part. Brooke was there for all of it, so concerned, so gentle. She'd find me confused, and she'd say, "Oh, Roy, you're having a bad day again, aren't you? Let me help you." She started keeping a little notebook of my episodes. She'd gently remind me of things I'd forgotten, some of which I wasn't sure I'd ever actually said, and she began carefully to talk to Eric about it and to me about it, planting the idea, watering it. "I'm worried about your father, Eric. He's slipping. I found him so confused today. Roy, honey, have you thought about the fact that this house is a lot to manage? Maybe it's time we talked about making things simpler for you." She was building a case. She was documenting a decline. And she was doing it so that, when the time was right, she could take the next step. She could argue that I was no longer competent to manage my own affairs, get herself or Eric appointed to control my money and my house through a guardianship, or push me into a facility and take over everything. And the beautiful, evil genius of it was that she had a witness to my decline who couldn't be argued with. Me. Because I believed it. I was so foggy and frightened and confused that I had become the star witness for my own destruction. When Brooke told Eric I was slipping, I would nod along, because from the inside, it felt completely true. Who was going to doubt my dementia when I didn't even doubt it myself? There was one afternoon in those 2 months that I've never told anyone about until now. I was standing in my own kitchen, the kitchen Helen and I had cooked in for 40 years, and for a few seconds I could not remember which drawer the spoons were in my own house. And I stood there, foggy and slow, opening drawer after drawer, and a terror rose up in me so total that I had to sit down on the floor. Because I thought, it's happening. It's really happening. I'm losing myself. I'm going to end up not knowing my own son, my own granddaughter, my own name. And I sat on that kitchen floor and I cried, quietly, so no one would hear, grieving my own mind while it was supposedly still slipping away. I know now that I was sitting on that floor drugged, that the spoons were exactly where they'd always been, and my mind was exactly as sharp as it had always been, and that the fog was something a person had put into my coffee that morning, but I didn't know it then. Then I just thought I was disappearing. I had started, in those 2 months, to give up. I'd begun to believe I was becoming a burden, that maybe a home was the right thing, that my life as a competent man was over. I'd started to withdraw, to feel ashamed, to feel myself disappearing. I was a beaten man who believed his own mind was the thing beating him. I did not know, it did not occur to me, because why would it, that every single one of those symptoms, the fog, the drowsiness, the confusion, the memory loss, is also exactly what happens to a person who is being quietly and regularly given a sedative, without their knowledge, day after day. Because that is what Brooke was doing. She was drugging me. She was putting something, we found out later it was a sedative, a sleep medication, ground up, into the food she so generously insisted on preparing just for me, into my special meals and my coffee, and at the party, into a special slice of cake. Not enough to knock me out cold and raise alarm. Just enough, day after day, to make a healthy man in his 70s look and feel exactly like someone sliding into dementia. She was manufacturing my decline, dose by dose, meal by meal, so that she could take everything I had. And she'd been doing it for 2 months, and it was working, and I had no idea, and I was weeks away from being declared incompetent and losing my house and my freedom and my very self. And the only person in that entire house who saw the truth was an 8-year-old girl. Let me tell you how Lily figured it out, because it breaks my heart and it saved my life, both at once. Lily was 8, and she adored me, and children watch everything. And what Lily had noticed, simply without understanding what it meant, was a pattern. She'd noticed that her mommy made Grandpa a special plate, different from everyone else's. And she'd noticed that after Grandpa ate his special food, Grandpa got sleepy and confused and sad. She didn't understand poison or sedatives or schemes. She was a little girl. But she loved her Grandpa, and she'd made the connection that the grown-ups all missed, the simple, childish, completely correct connection. The special food Mommy makes for Grandpa makes Grandpa sick. And it scared her. And she'd been carrying that fear, not knowing what to do with it, until her birthday party, when she saw her mother cutting me a special slice of cake, and she couldn't hold it in anymore, and she tugged my sleeve and told me not to eat it. Eat the other one, the normal one, out of the mouth of a child. The one pure, clear-eyed person in that house, too young to be fooled by Brooke's warmth, saw exactly what was happening, because she was looking with love instead of assumptions. I found out later that Lily had been trying to tell me for weeks, in the ways an 8-year-old tries to tell you things. She'd started hovering around me at meals, watching my plate. She'd asked her mother once, at dinner, why Grandpa got different food, and been told to hush and eat. She'd started drawing pictures, her mother found them later, of Grandpa sleeping, with a frowny face, and Grandpa's special plate with little X's on it. She was an 8-year-old building her own case in crayon, trying to make sense of the terrible things she'd noticed, and the only tools she had were a child's tools. Nobody read the pictures, nobody answered the questions, and so finally, at her own birthday party, with her mother cutting me that slice right in front of her, my brave girl used the last tool she had, which was to tug my sleeve and whisper the truth directly into my ear. It was her last resort. Thank God I have relived it 1,000 times, and thank God she took it. Now, let me take you back to that party, and the switched plates, and the hour that changed everything. When Lily whispered her warning, and I saw Brooke's face in that kitchen doorway, I did not consciously understand the whole scheme. I want to be honest about that. I didn't stand there and think, my daughter-in-law is drugging me to steal my house. I wasn't capable of a thought that clear. I was 2 months into the fog. But something older and deeper than conscious thought moved in me. A child I trusted had warned me. And the look on Brooke's face when she saw that child warn me was the look of someone caught. And some animal part of my brain, some survival instinct that the drugs hadn't reached, said, "Don't eat that cake. Test it. See." So I switched the plates. When Brooke set that special corner slice in front of me and went back to the kitchen, I quietly slid it aside and took a plain piece from the main tray, the same cake everyone else was eating. And I ate the plain piece. And I left Brooke's special slice sitting on the table. And then I waited, and I watched, and the next hour unfolded like the slow lifting of a curtain I hadn't known was there. The first thing that happened was the most shocking thing that has ever happened inside my own head. Because as that hour passed, and I ate normal party food like a normal person, something began to change in me. The fog started to lift. Not all at once, but as the minutes went by, I felt my head begin to clear in a way it hadn't cleared in 2 months. The wet sand drained out of my skull. The world sharpened. My thoughts, which had been moving through mud, started to move freely again. I sat in that chair at my granddaughter's birthday party, and I felt myself come back. Felt my own mind returning to me like blood returning to a limb you'd been sitting on. That pins and needles rush of a thing waking up. And I sat there, more and more clear-headed by the minute, and a horror began to dawn on me, because there was only one explanation for what I was feeling. If skipping the special food made my mind come back, then the special food was what had been taking my mind away. My decline wasn't in my brain, it was in my plate. Someone had been doing this to me. And the second thing that happened in that hour, I will remember until the day I die. Brooke ate the cake. I don't know exactly how it happened. The party was crowded and busy, plates and slices everywhere, and I think that in the chaos of hosting, and not knowing I'd switched anything, she simply ended up with the special slice I'd left on the table, or a piece got handed to her, and she absent-mindedly ate it the way you eat at a party without thinking. But she ate it. She ate the slice she had prepared for me, and over the next while I watched my daughter-in-law, this sharp, controlled, careful woman, begin to slur her words. I watched her get unsteady on her feet. I watched her sit down heavily on the couch and struggle to keep her eyes open, watched her become confused, watched her turn into, in front of the whole party, exactly the drowsy, foggy, disoriented person that I had been for 2 months. Guests started to murmur, "Is Brooke okay? She seems out of it. Maybe she's exhausted from the party." And I sat there, my own mind now crystal clear for the first time in 2 months, and I watched the drug that she had been feeding me do its work on her, and I understood everything completely, all at once. And then came the moment. Because at some point, through her own growing fog, Brooke looked over at the table and saw her special slice was gone, and she looked at the plain plate in front of me. And I watched her do the math, even half drugged. I watched the realization crawl across her face. She understood that I had switched the plates. She understood that she had eaten what she'd made for me. And she understood that I now knew, that I was sitting there wide awake and clear-eyed, watching her, and that I knew what she was. Our eyes met across that room, hers going glassy and unfocused, mine clearer than they'd been in months, and we had an entire silent conversation in that look. She knew that I knew, and she couldn't say a single word about it, not one, because the only way to explain it was to confess. She was trapped inside her own crime, drowsy and slurring on my sofa, unable to accuse me of switching a slice of cake without revealing why it mattered. That was the hour. And when the party finally wound down, and Brooke had been helped to bed to sleep it off, and the guests had gone, I sat alone in my kitchen, clear-headed, shaking, more awake than I'd been in 2 months and more afraid than I'd ever been, because I finally understood what had been done to me, and I knew I could not survive it alone. And I needed help. I needed someone I could trust absolutely, someone who would know what to do, someone the drugs and the scheme couldn't touch. And there was only one person in the world like that, and I hadn't spoken to him in 30 years. So I found an old address book in a drawer, Helen's careful handwriting on the pages, and I looked up a number, and with a clear mind and a shaking hand, I dialed it. The number belonged to a man named Marty Kovach. Marty and I had been best friends once, the closest kind, from our 20s into our 40s. We grew up together, came up together, were in each other's weddings. And Marty had become a police detective, a good one, sharp as a tack, the kind of man who could look at a situation and see the truth of it in about 4 seconds. And then, 30 years ago, we'd had a falling out. A stupid one, honestly, the kind that seems enormous at the time and pointless in hindsight. A business disagreement that got personal and said things that couldn't be unsaid, and we'd let it end the friendship. 30 years of silence over pride. It's one of the regrets of my life. But when I sat in that kitchen, needing someone who would believe me, someone who would know exactly what to do, someone with the eyes to see a crime and the training to prove it, there was only one name in the whole world. Because underneath 30 years of stubborn silence, I knew, the way you know these things, that if I called Marty Kovach and told him I was in trouble, he would come. Some friendships don't die, they just wait. I dialed the number, half expecting it to be disconnected after 30 years. It rang, and an old man's voice, gruff and familiar even after all that time, answered, "Hello?" And I said, "Marty, it's Roy Maddox." And there was a long pause, and then he said quietly, "Well, I'll be damned, Roy Maddox. After 30 years, this better be good, you old fool." And I heard the smile in it, and 30 years just fell away, and I nearly wept with relief. And then I told him everything. And Marty Kovach, retired detective, my oldest friend, listened without interrupting. And when I finished, his voice had changed completely. The warmth was still there, but underneath it was something hard and focused, the old cop coming awake. And he said, "Roy, listen to me very carefully and do exactly what I say. This is serious, and if you do it right, you'll have her dead to rights, and if you do it wrong, she'll talk her way out and you'll lose everything, so listen." And he told me what to do, and I want to share it with you, because it's exactly right, and because it might help someone listening who's in a situation they don't understand yet. First, he said, do not confront her. Do not tip her off. Act normal. Act foggy, even. Keep pretending you're still declining. Because the moment she knows you're onto her, she'll stop, clean everything up, and you'll have no proof. Let her think she's still winning. Second, he said, get tested, immediately, before it clears your system. He told me to go to a doctor, not my usual one Brooke didn't know about, and tell them I suspected I was being given a drug without my knowledge, and ask for a full toxicology screen. Blood, and especially a hair follicle test, because he explained that drugs stay in your hair for months, laid down day by day like rings in a tree, and a hair test wouldn't just show that I'd been drugged. It would show a 2-month history of it, dose after dose, which is exactly the pattern of someone being poisoned over time. That hair, he said, would be the whole case. Third, he said, preserve evidence. That special slice of cake, if any of it was left, bag it, don't let anyone throw it out. Her special food, her stash of whatever she was using, if I could safely identify where she kept it without tipping her off, note it, but touch nothing. And fourth, he said, once you have the toxicology in hand, we go to the authorities, the real ones, Adult Protective Services and the police, with proof, not just a story, so that it's airtight and she can't wriggle free. You don't get one shot at this and blow it on emotion, Marty said. You get her with evidence and you get her clean, now. Can you do that, or are you going to let this woman steal your life? And for the first time in what felt like forever, with my mind clear and my oldest friend in my ear, I said, I can do that. And I did exactly what Marty told me. The hardest part was the pretending. For the next several days, I had to go on living in that house with Brooke, acting like the same foggy, declining old man, while inside my head was clearer than it had been in months and screaming with the knowledge of what she was. I had to let her serve me my special meals, and I stopped actually eating them, secretly, disposing of the food when she wasn't looking, so I stayed clear-headed while pretending I wasn't. It was the strangest, most frightening acting job of my life, playing the victim of my own poisoning to the face of the woman poisoning me, all while my mind sharpened and my resolve hardened. But I did it because Marty was right. One shot, done clean. There was one terrifying moment during those pretending days. Brooke came into the den one evening while I was on the phone with Marty, planning, and I hadn't heard her come in, and for a second I thought she'd overheard. My clear, quick mind, the mind she didn't know I had back, saved me. Without missing a beat, I made my voice go slow and foggy and confused, and I said into the phone, loud enough for her to hear, I'm sorry, who is this again? I'm a little mixed up today. And I hung up, and I looked at Brooke with the vacant, apologetic smile of a declining old man, and I said, wrong number, I think. Or I forgot who I called. You know how I am lately. And I watched her relax, watched her buy it completely, watched her look at me with that fake tender pity, and inside I was ice cold and wide awake and thinking clearly, I've got you. You just don't know it yet. It was the best acting of my life, and it was fueled by a rage I'd never felt before. The specific rage of a man who's discovered that his own helplessness was manufactured. I quietly saw a new doctor, one Brooke knew nothing about. I told them what I suspected. And I want to tell you, that doctor took me completely seriously. Because, it turns out, drugging an elderly person to fake their decline is a known form of elder abuse, a real thing that happens more than anyone wants to admit, and doctors know it. They ran the blood work, and they took the hair sample, and they sent it all off to a lab, and a few days later the results came back, and they were everything Marty said they'd be. My blood showed the sedative. But the hair told the whole story. It showed the drug in my system going back, layer by layer, right to about the time Brooke had taken over my meals 2 months earlier. It was a chemical diary of my own poisoning. I had never been prescribed that drug. I had never knowingly taken it in my life. There was no innocent explanation for 2 months of a sedative I'd never heard of showing up in my body in steady doses. It was proof, the kind of proof that doesn't wash off, and it proved that I was not losing my mind, that I had never been losing my mind, that a healthy man had been chemically dismantled by the person who cooked his meals. I cannot describe to you what it did to me to hold those results in my hand. Relief and horror in the exact same breath. Relief, because I was not demented, I was not disappearing, my mind was whole and always had been. And horror, because someone I had welcomed into my home, my son's wife, my granddaughter's mother, had looked at a grieving old man and decided to steal his mind for his money. Then I did the last part. With the toxicology in hand, and with Marty guiding me the whole way, I went to Adult Protective Services and to the police. And this time, I didn't come as a confused old man with a wild story. I came as a victim with a laboratory report proving a 2-month pattern of covert poisoning. And that changes everything. The authorities took it with the seriousness it deserved, because secretly administering a drug to another person is a serious crime. It has names like poisoning and assault, and when it's done to an elderly person to steal from them, it's aggravated elder abuse, and the law comes down hard on it. They investigated. They found her stash of the crushed medication. The preserved cake, what was left of it, tested positive. The case was overwhelming. Brooke was arrested. And I'll be clear because this is the honest truth. I never confronted her, never shouted at her, never got my revenge in some dramatic scene. I did it the right way, Marty's way, with evidence and the law, and it was far more devastating to her than any confrontation could have been, because there was no arguing with the hair follicle. She was charged, and the evidence was ironclad, and she faced the full weight of what she'd done. I won't detail her sentence except to say that justice was served thoroughly, and that the woman who tried to erase my mind to take my house lost her own freedom instead. But the part of this that I have to tell you about, the part that matters most, is my son, Eric. Because Eric had no idea. I told you that at the start, and it's the truth, and it's the thing that nearly broke him. My son had been traveling for work, while his wife slowly poisoned his father in his own childhood home, and he had believed her when she told him I was declining, because why wouldn't he believe his own wife, and because I myself had seemed to confirm it. He had actually started, in those weeks, to look into care facilities and to have gentle, painful conversations with Brooke about what was best for Dad, not knowing that every word of the premise was a lie she'd manufactured with a bottle of crushed pills. When it all came out, when the toxicology came back and the police came and the truth of what his wife had done was laid bare, my son fell apart in a way I have never seen. The horror of it, that the woman he'd married and had a child with had been capable of this, under his roof, to his father. The guilt that he hadn't seen it, that he'd been away, that he'd half believed I was failing. He came to me, my grown son, and he wept like a child and begged me to forgive him for not protecting me, for not seeing it. And I held him, and I told him the truth, that there was nothing to forgive, that he had been deceived as completely as I had, that Brooke had fooled us both, that the whole point of what she did was to make it invisible. He was not guilty of anything except trusting his wife, which is not a crime. We were both her victims. And realizing that together is what saved my relationship with my son instead of destroying it. Eric's marriage to Brooke, of course, did not survive. You don't stay married to the person who drugged your father. There was a divorce, and it was ugly, and there's a little girl in the middle of it, my Lily, which is the hardest part of the whole thing. But Eric and I came out of it closer than we'd been in years, bound together by having survived the same betrayal, and he moved himself and Lily into my house for real this time, as family, as a son helping his father and a father raising his daughter, and it's been a good thing, a healing thing, in the middle of all the wreckage. And Lily, my granddaughter, who saved my life with a whisper at a birthday party. I have thought so much about what that little girl did. She didn't have a plan. She didn't understand crime or poison or money. She just loved her grandpa, and she watched him with clear eyes, and she noticed a simple, true thing that every adult in that house had missed, and she was brave enough to tug my sleeve and tell me. An 8-year-old saw through a scheme that had fooled her father, fooled the doctors I'd been seeing, and fooled me, the victim, so completely that I'd been ready to surrender my own mind. She saw it because she was watching with love, and love, it turns out, sees clearly. I owe that child everything. I owe her my mind, my freedom, my home, my life. And she'll never fully understand, I hope, exactly what she saved me from. She just knows Grandpa's better now, and that she was a good girl for telling. And Marty, my oldest friend, who I'd thrown away over pride for 30 years. Well, I've got my friend back. That's the one clean gift in all of this. Marty and I talk every week now, two old men who wasted 30 years being stubborn and aren't going to waste whatever's left. He says I owe him for the detective work. I say he owes me 30 years of insults he didn't get to make. We're making up for lost time. It took my daughter-in-law trying to destroy me to teach me the thing Marty and I should have known all along, that you don't throw away the people who'd come for you when it counts. Not over pride, not over anything. Let me leave you with a few things, and then a question, because I really do read these. If someone you love seems to be declining, getting foggy, confused, forgetful, slipping, especially if it came on fast, and especially if it seems to happen most around one particular person, or after they eat food that person prepares, please do not just assume it's age, do not just assume it's dementia. I am living proof that a healthy mind can be chemically stolen, dose by someone with something to gain, and that it can look exactly, perfectly like natural decline. It is a real thing, it happens. And the victim is the last person who can see it, because the very thing being attacked is the mind that would notice. If you have a bad feeling, get a toxicology test, a hair test. It cannot lie. It might save someone's mind, the way an 8-year-old and a hair follicle saved mine. And trust the children in your life. Trust the ones who love you with clear eyes. They see what the rest of us, with all our assumptions and our politeness and our not wanting to believe, cannot. So here's my question, and I'd genuinely like to know, has a child, or someone who loved you plainly and simply, ever seen a truth that all the grown-ups around you missed? Tell me about it. I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, do me one kindness before you go. Leave a comment, even a single word, so I know you stayed with us all the way to the end. And subscribe, so the next story finds you when it comes. Because they keep coming. And the next time a child tugs your sleeve and tells you something serious, with a serious little face, stop laughing and listen. They might be telling you the most important thing you'll ever hear.